Mary, check it.
but it would never happen in real life. And you think that there's miraculous, and of course that would be extremely difficult. And the chances would be 1 in a million. But God could, using science and using the laws of our reality.
He created the science.
So he knows
The
exactly
laws that hold the universe together.
exactly how to do it.
Yep.
But the point is, he didn't bend the laws of our reality. He
Right.
came to us and used our science of all world that it is possible.
Yeah.
Science has proved it. We don't know how to do it. How are you gonna miss all of the atoms? I mean, how
We
much
got sound?
do we know
Okay.
how to do it 1,000 years ago?
All right. For those of you who may have been watching or who may end up watching this, sorry for that beginning. Hope you're good at reading lips. But we just got into weird science-y sidetrack, so if you came here for church, you didn't miss anything. Okay. All right. So, path of Jesus, the dust, the feet. Is that it? I think that was it.
Yeah.
All right. So, on to today. So, Saturday morning or Friday morning, um, I had a phone call with a friend from way far away. Somebody I've known for like probably 30, 40 years almost. And they have a daughter who has been having some problems with fear. And it was interesting that the more and more I had thought about it, that fear is something that I don't know if I've ever really touched on. So this might be end up being a 2 week thing. We'll see how we get through it. I'm kind of thinking that I might lay down a little bit of information today, go through it kind of in a quick 40 league boot style where we get through it, and then kind of go back and do some more detail like we did with the traveling from Egypt to the promised land, where we went back and did a few layers of learning on it. We might end up doing that with this too. We'll kind of see how it goes at the end of the day, because I was thinking like fear is definitely something that I think that I don't know of anyone who has never experienced that. Especially like as kids. I mean, everybody was afraid of the dark, and if you weren't, there was something that made you jump at some point. Then there's people who like to be afraid, who go to those haunted house things that they like that thrill. Me, not so much. I think the last time I did something like that was back in the day where they had those little carts that would drive through, and then you'd have like a cardboard cutout that would be like "boo," like that was probably the last scary thing that I did. So yeah, not so much, but it's something that we can all connect to. It's something we can all associate with. Now, this won't necessarily connect directly to everyone's problems with fear or everyone's experiences with fear, but I think that the idea itself that you'll be able to connect to. So there's something that I live in a strange fear of like every single day. And like it's interesting to me because before I started this, like I have always said that like I mean there's almost nothing that I fear because of the fact that like I know that whatever ends up happening, God is going to be with me. Like there's like no situation I can walk into. There's no thing that I, have been in a position where I had fear driving my emotions. When we were going downtown, like, everybody was like, oh, what about if somebody did, and in the 15 years that we were doing the downtown homeless stuff, like a knife got pulled out on me one time by someone who wasn't even from the normal area that we were, caring for. And before I could even react, like I didn't even get to turn. I was filling a soup cup at the back of the truck. This guy pulls out a knife, a box cutter, and he was just like, yo, I need you to take me to the west side. And as I turned to see, who's this guy asking me for a ride to the west side? Like, do I know him? And as I turn, I see the box cutter in his hand. And then one of the homeless people that we have taken care of like week after week after week just flies up out of nowhere and shoves him to the curb and tells him to get his butt back to the west side. Like I didn't even have to do anything. That was the only time that there was ever anything dangerous. Well, there was one time where I tried to break up a fight and the guy pulled out a bat. But other than that, I was getting involved in that one. But danger for us, like that was it. And I never had fear of going there because like I knew that God goes before me in everything I do. But there's one thing that just, oh, I cannot find a way to not think about it where it does cause me anxiety like every day, and that is this pacemaker. Like, it's just like a time bomb in my chest that I never know when it's going to do something. That, like, I might get scared, and if my heart reaches a certain pattern, it's going to shock me. There's been times where I was sweeping a hallway, not doing anything crazy, and just from bending over and standing up a few too many times, all of a sudden, pow, I got zapped. And so there are certain things that, like, I'm very skittish about doing because of the fact that, like, I don't know if I'm going to hit the parameters that cause this thing to go off. And like last year, it ended up going off 10 times on me. And like that's almost once a month. And it sucks because of the fact that when it happens, it takes about a month to recover because the shock is just intense. It's damaging. It harms the heart. The heart then has to reheal. It has to, like, have this time to rest. So like I'm kind of out for a bit. So last year was especially hard because of that. And so that is something that, like, I always live with this fear of like getting cut off on the expressway. Like I feel my heart start pounding a little bit harder. Is it going to be enough that it throws me into a weird rhythm, or if it elevates too much, because I think the threshold is like 200 beats a minute. And if I get to that, it shocks me. And so, like, for that to happen while I'm on the expressway, like, just those thoughts, like, even driving on the expressway has been something that, like, I did this for years of my life. Like, when I was a surveyor, I can't even tell you how many miles I put on, behind the road because of, working in 5 different states. And, like, now, just the little 13-minute drive to get here, there's tremendous anxiety because people are just so selfish in the way that they drive. Like, I can't tell you how many times I get cut off. It's like, do I have a sign behind me that says cut me off? I'm like, I don't know, but it always happens. So, there's a lot of little things in everyday life that, sometimes, like, my brain, remembers me in my 20s and like what I used to do. And so if I get into a flow and I'm just going, I don't even notice that, my heart getting a little elevated. And so I might not be doing anything that is, physically like weightlifting kind of a thing. But because of certain motions, up and down, bending over, things like that, if I do too much of that, my heart gets a little confused, doesn't know when it should be beating harder and softer, and then it gets out of a weird rhythm, and then I get zapped. And so it was interesting. I had asked Chat last year, or maybe at the beginning of this year, what was the equivalent of that shock? Because I thought maybe it was like getting hit in the chest with like a baseball, a pitcher throwing a baseball at you. And it was actually more intense. The amount of joules of energy that is released into your heart when you get shocked, it is the equivalent of if you were laying down on the sidewalk outside of a 3-story building and someone dropping a 2-liter bottle on your chest. Like, all right, so I asked Chat the amount of energy in joules that is released when this thing shocks me, what would be the equivalent, like getting hit in the chest with a baseball? It came back and said it's closer to if you were laying on a sidewalk outside of a 3-story building and from a 3rd-story window, somebody dropping a 2-liter bottle of pop onto your chest. Man. So when I've said that it feels like getting hit in the chest with like a sledgehammer, like, that's pretty close.
Imagine if Chad said like 1,000 stories.
I don't know if anybody would be able to be alive on that one. Yeah. So there is something that I fear every day. But when it comes to life situations, like, I don't have that fear because of the fact that I am very aware that God is always with me. One of the things that I did early on in my 20s, I used to have this Casio watch, and I had set it to go off every 30 minutes. And every time that thing went beep, it was a reminder, hey, Robert, God is with you. So throughout my day of working, whether I was at lunch, pounding in stakes in the ground, digging, looking for property corners, whatever it was. When that thing went off, it was a reminder that even if I was in the middle of the woods looking for some old monument from 100 years ago by myself, God was with me. I don't know if that's where it comes from, but if that is it, I encourage you to give that a try. But to become mentally aware that there's never a time in your life, in the mundane things that you do, yes, even going to the bathroom, even showering, that God is always with you. So like having a fear of slipping in the shower, like, there's things we could do to prevent that, but to not live in that fear, because fear releases cortisol, which is not good for you internally. And it's just something that you have to like try to live with as much or without as much of it as you can. Yeah. So there's my fear. All right, that's one that there's just, I don't know if I'll ever get over it. If I could flip the little thing off and just like breathe for a second, but like I know it's always there and it's always watching and it's always waiting. That minute that I get out of line, it's gonna zap me. Oh, that stinks. So I don't know what your fear is. Um, Going back to jail. There's a good one. Yeah. I don't know until you go there, buddy. Yeah, I worked at Statesville for a minute, and trust me. Mm-mm.
I used to have pretty bad depressive episodes, but with this medicine, it doesn't happen anymore. But I still sometimes am afraid that I'll come back.
Yeah. Yeah. Repeating the past, stagnation. Yeah. Yeah. So you guys see that there's something that we all can connect with fear. Okay. Now the next step is how can we deal with this in a way that helps us to live a more fuller life, and like life capital L, not just living, but to really live. Okay. So another story that I want to tell you, not really fictitious, but because it has happened, maybe not exactly like this. But just imagine Gabe at nighttime laying in his bed in his room. Yeah, I'm talking about you, buddy. And all of a sudden, he has a bad dream, or a shirt falls off of the hanger in his closet, or suddenly a car drives by and makes a shadow on the wall move, and he sees it. Okay. Instantly, he grabs his blanket tight and he goes, "Dad!" Now, for that moment, until I get into that room, that shadow is there, that shirt that just fell is there, whatever it is that spooked him, or maybe even just a bad dream, having a dream and you waking up and you don't know where you are, so you're afraid. Whatever it is, it happens until the moment that I open his door. Actually, it's a bookcase. He lives in a bookcase room. So I open up the bookcase and I go into his room, and at that moment, he's at peace. He hugs me, I hug him, and all I say is, "It's okay, buddy." Now, what changed? Did the shadow go anywhere? Did the clothing that fell, hop back up on the hanger? Well, that would be really weird. But like, nothing. That would be pretty wild.
The only way you could have back on without somebody is a ghost.
A ghost? Okay. All right. So, with that, like nothing in the room changed. He didn't change, but what happened? The most important thing was that someone bigger than the fear entered the room. Okay. So I want you to be thinking about that idea, something bigger than the fear entering into the room. Okay. So it's interesting that fear says things to us like, "You're not good enough, you can't do this, you'll never achieve this, you're not safe, you're all alone, you're by yourself," or something bad is about to happen. Okay. Now it's interesting that we hear those things in our head, and boy, do we run with them. Okay. Now, fear can have a very convincing voice, especially if it is unleashed. Okay. Once it starts going, like you will just get into a downward spiral of more and more things that will make you afraid. That little room, the hanger falls, the shadow, all of a sudden there's a monster under the bed. I mean, it's going to keep escalating. It's going to keep getting bigger. Okay. But that whole thing, that whole situation for him changed when the dad walked into the room. So fear loses power when someone stronger is present. And that leads us to something that we can see throughout the whole story of the Bible. Okay. When people are afraid, God doesn't come into the room and say, "Oh, don't worry, that was just a hanger. And you see, on this hanger, it's kind of short and the neck opening is kind of large. And so, it just ruffled and fell off." God doesn't do anything like that. He doesn't try to explain the situation. He comes to us with a reminder and says, "Do not fear." In fact, in the verse it says, "Do not fear, for I am sometimes going to be with you," right? Yeah. Wait, fear is in the Bible? Do not fear is in the Bible 365 times? Well, that's very cool. So, Mike here said that in the Bible, you'll find that it is written 365 times. Do not fear, do not be afraid. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. It's like every day of your life that you live in a calendar year, you've got God saying, "Don't be afraid." I wish I would have known that. That's really cool. Thank you for adding that. All right, so back to that verse. He does not say, "I am going to be with you some of the time." What does he say? He says, "Lo, I am with you always, always." So, continuing on this idea of fear, where does it come from? Why does it speak so loudly? And how does God teach his people to live even when fear appears? Okay, so one, the purpose of fear. It's interesting that sometimes we have in our head that fear is a bad thing, that fear may be a sin. Okay? Fear is not a sin. In fact, before we even talk about overcoming fear, we need to really understand something important is that fear itself is not automatically bad. Fear itself is actually a part of the God design for our mind and our bodies to help and protect us. It is a warning system. So when the brain senses danger, okay, it is programmed to just always be monitoring, okay? If it senses something, it's going to start to react. It's going to react quickly. It's going to make your heart beat faster. It's going to make you breathe more. So you're getting more oxygen in case your muscles have to be used. They need oxygen. So your body starts to pump blood through the body faster, sucking in oxygen, putting it into the bloodstream, getting it to those muscles that might have to run. All right. So this is how God has prepared the body to act. This is what scientists call fight or flight response. Okay. But it has helped people survive for millennia. It will continue to help us survive. And hopefully, each and every one of us have a healthy dose of fear. Because, like, I have definitely had some people in my life that had zero fear. Like, I guess there's one more thing that I am afraid of that I don't usually get into situations that I deal with it. But back when I first started surveying, if you guys have gone on 94 to Chicago, right when you cross that big steel bridge and there's that garbage dump right there on the one side, the woods on the other. Well, when they redid that steel bridge, I was walking across the steel beams that hold up that road, connecting that bridge, looking down at the water just going. Actually, it was going this way. And so it was really interesting that as I was walking across, that I didn't have fear. And then I end up getting a job out in Orland Park at Odyssey by the golf course in the big musical place. And this basketball player was putting a full court in his basement. So the company that got hired to build his house had to use every single form in the company because this basement was like, I don't know, 25 feet deep. It was crazy. So there I am measuring the foundation. Like I've walked foundations all the time, never had a problem with a foundation. And all of a sudden I get to this inside corner, like this is the house here. And as I get to that inside corner, I take the tape measure and I go down to the bottom. I'm holding my little notebook because I got to write these numbers down. I get down there, and as I take the tape and I put it right at the corner of the concrete foundation to measure it, my eyes just look down and I see the stone all around me. My legs froze. I could not move. Could not move. Huh? No, because of that depth. It was like all of a sudden, like when I looked down at the, because it was an unfinished, like this was just the concrete walls. The basement hadn't been poured yet. So there was just rocks down there. And as I saw that, it was just like have you ever seen the movies where they do that, where it like stretches out? Even though it was like only 25 feet or whatever, like when I looked down, it was just like, it might have been a half a mile deep. in my head. So my brain was telling me, be afraid because if you fall, you're going to get hurt. And it made my legs paralyzed.
You were on, you're standing like this was the rock, right?
No, I was standing on the concrete foundation wall. Like I was walking the foundation like a balance beam.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, because like the wall's all dug out, so you can't like measure it. And so like you get onto the foundation and you just walk the foundation. You have another guy behind you. He's the one that has the tape measure. He reads out the numbers to you, but you're walking on, a foundation wall, you know? And so I was on this inside corner where I had 270 degrees. Wait, let's see. 390s. What's 390s? 180 plus another 70.
70.
Okay, so I was right. Okay, good memory. So I had 270 degrees of nothing but drop, and it paralyzed me. And after that, I've never been able to do heights. Just have it.
So like the walls were like coming together like this, right?
Yep.
Like
You're in the basement. I'm on the outside of the house.
you're on the outside of the house.
So, well, I'm walking on the foundation looking inside. All right.
Plugging the
these
wall, and he's got to measure down.
Imagine you're playing
Yeah.
Minecraft and you dig a big hole and then you make the walls. Well, no, you don't dig it. You make the walls out so you don't put a roof on. You're
He's
just
on
walking
the
around
perimeter.
the
So
wall.
the house hasn't even been built yet?
No, it's just the foundation.
That's right, it's getting
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
just the foundation.
It was just so like even the dirt was all pulled away so they could get their forms off. And so it was just like trenches around it. So at the garage, we were able to hop onto the foundation and we just started measuring around the perimeter of the house. Because you have to get every wall of the house for the measurement to make sure they built what was supposed to be built.
So it was going like this, like there were two walls, and you were right here, and you were looking out to all of this.
Opposite. Flip it around. Do your point going up. Okay.
Okay.
Where you're standing, you're on hard ground. Everything on the other side of that V that you're drawing was all the basement.
Okay. We'll talk about it later.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so I had 270 degrees. My legs just froze. And the other guy that was with me came up and he put his hand on me and he was like, "You okay?" And as soon as he did that, I could feel my legs again and I stood up. And then I actually did a intensely harder job. I climbed down because I was not getting back up on that foundation again. I climbed down and measured it along the tar walls where it was just dirty and man, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it anymore after that. So I don't know what flipped in my brain, but that has never flipped back after that experience. So there's something else that I fear, but like that's something I don't experience every day. What? Heights. Yeah. Yeah. Now some things don't. Like, I was on a 13-foot ladder, 15-foot ladder, and I was okay, even when I just looked around and I saw I was okay and for the most part, but yeah, there's some things with height that like
But then you get on a 32-foot ladder with an easel and a brush in one hand.
no. You won't find me doing anything like that. Nope. Not for me. All right. So let's see. So the fear, the brain senses danger, it starts to react. Fight or flight. Oh, okay. So another example of this kind of a thing where it's a good thing is okay. It's not a bad thing. Somebody steps into the street and suddenly they see a car coming, all right, at a fast rate of speed. Their body reacts before they can even think about it and they jump back. Okay. That is this fear response kicking in because God has wired us in such a way that it helps to protect us. Without that response, we would actually respond too slow and then we could actually really get hurt. So this is a gift of protection that God gave us where it's instantaneous rather than we have to think about it, process the information. All right. Now, if you think about it, fear was meant to protect us from real dangers. Okay. Now, what about like with Gabriel in this case of being in his room and something, a shadow moves and whatever, now the brain is not dealing with something that is real, but it starts to create a scenario where it becomes very real to him. And it's a real fear that he needs help, that he needs to be saved from. Okay. So this is when fear becomes something that it was not intended because it starts to distort how we're thinking about the situation. Okay. You might have heard about deer freezing in the headlights of a car. Okay. Instead of running, you think that if they saw a car coming up, they would just run. But this is the problem with deer. They have a different system set up in their head. They are actually hypersensitive to taking in information. They are always looking for dangers around them. But this backfires on them when it comes to something that is a very loud sound because they freeze, and headlights coming at them, they freeze. Okay. They're unsure of the danger. They don't know if they should be afraid because either the sound was far away, these lights are far away, but they're intensely bright. So their brain starts to try to figure out what's going on. Do we run? Do we stay? And it's in that suddenly their brain becomes frozen because of overstimulation, this overwhelming not knowing what to do. These bright lights are coming at me, so they freeze. Okay. I kind of feel like that was kind of my moment on the concrete wall, that there was so much being taken in.
A lot of people say
Fight, flight, and freeze. You're right.
because that normally happens with those three cases.
Yep. Yeah, those are the normal reactions that we have. Like for humans, it's
that for a long time. It's
yeah. And the freeze can help you because, like, if you see a train coming, and obviously, you stop moving real quick. So your body has these mechanisms.
in the woods when you hear stick break and you immediately instincts you're checking your surroundings, make sure you're
Yeah.
okay. Your first option is I'm gonna freeze. Nobody can hear me like the deer. Nobody can hear me. I'm not moving. Make a
I'm not moving. I'm safe.
You'll
Nobody
go
can hear
away,
me.
but then you're like, now your second option is, do I fight? Am I going to fight this thing that could be coming to hurt me? Am I going to try to retreat? Am I going to try to run?
Yeah.
That's basic instinct.
Yeah. It's how we're hardwired in.
We're hardwired.
Yeah. All right. So this fear becomes so overwhelming that the deer becomes paralyzed and confused. Okay. Many times we can also experience that too. So fear makes us lose peace. Now that's a very interesting idea because, when you're at peace, the whole idea of saying shalom means, God's peace be upon you. Okay. Some people actually say God's peace be upon you. When you leave, God's peace be upon you. So there's something important about peace. And I think even in our life, that the way that we are hardwired, we are wired in such a way that psychology says that we are drawn to pleasure and we resist pain. All right. Same thing with this idea of peace. Peace helps to have pleasure. You can't have pleasure if you're in pain. You can't have, pleasure if you're in the middle of chaos. So peace is a very important factor, and fear robs you of your peace. And this is why there's certain things that you would like to study in the Bible, but they don't phrase it like that, because ultimately the core problem isn't the problem that you are, sensing. It's that your peace is being taken away, your safety is being taken away from you. Okay. So that's when fear stops protecting us and it starts to do something the opposite. It starts to control us. It starts to make us do things that maybe we wouldn't normally do. It makes us start to doubt God, because at those moments when something is before you and it seems really real, but yet God is all around us, but it's kind of in this abstract way, that unless you've tuned your life to seeing those God moments every day, that you start to see He is always with me, then in those moments, whatever the reality is in front of you, that is going to override your faith. So the Bible talks about fear quite a bit, apparently 365 times, which is really awesome. I got to look that up. But in 2 Timothy 1:7, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Now, it's interesting that he puts in there the sound mind, all right, because we're talking about that. What is our mind doing when it connects with fear? Okay, so this idea of having a sound mind, he gives us power. He doesn't make us fear. That's something that he added to our programming to help protect us, but it was not meant to be how we need to live our life. In fact, living in a state of fear is detrimental. That one guy I always talk about, Gabor Mate, If you look at some of his things with trauma, the work that he's been doing in the last 50 years with trauma, maybe even more, it's really amazing that people who grow up in war torn societies, that changes the way that they're wired. And like, it's horrifically sad that, the first 18 months, a child needs to have security. And if a child doesn't have security in those first 18 months, their brain gets wired in a different way that will never change. That's going to be how they are.
Like when you're in fear, it's like nothing else matters but my protection. It's like my safety is at the line, my survival is at the line, so nothing else matters. So if you're living in fear, you're easily able to lose control, whether it be
Yeah,
religion,
easily.
anything. Because if I'm in fear, I will do whatever it takes to make sure that my fear is squandered, that my hunger is diminished, that my safety, my shelter, that whatever's making me scared, I can fix it. And
Yeah.
it's in my power because I need to do it. Even once I'm done right, you gotta do it yourself. And so I'm not looking at God to help me. I'm not looking at any external source but myself. So the devil would want people to live in fear so that we wouldn't be looking for God for the answer. Government or whatever higher thing we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense because when you're in fear, you see there's nothing else, and how can I get past that?
Yeah. So you're actually bringing up a point that at the end of this lesson, I would hope that people would have. And that's exactly it. If you are living in fear, you are more easily controlled.
Absolutely. You know what's fascinating is like right around when I was 2 years old, my mom and dad got into a fight and it got physical, and I was in my dad's arms
Wow.
when it got physical.
So you had a front row seat to a
Yeah.
very traumatic event that you'll keep with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to let that affect you.
Yeah.
You have to consciously, because like I'm sure a lot of us have seen things, like I know I have definitely seen things as a little kid that a little kid should not have seen,
Right.
and it's always there. Like even when I'm not thinking about it, something will just, hey, don't forget about that.
Yeah, and these things affect us subconsciously.
Yeah, and subconsciously. Yeah, yeah,
I learned a lot about how like so many things that have happened to us affect us in so many ways that we don't even realize.
yeah.
It's like a big topic in the rehab community, fear, mental health, and just fear control, the fight scene.
Interesting.
We talk about a lot trauma because it's a lot of like addiction and just mental health and people who are down on their luck. A lot of it has to do with trauma.
Yeah, trauma is definitely a huge factor in drug abuse. The escape because things have not been able to be dealt with.
Lots of times it is because of fear.
Yeah,
Because even if you experience trauma, the trauma isn't the main root of it either. I mean, that might be the cause, but it's that making you from it. And scared it's gonna happen again,
yeah,
it's gonna cause something, blah blah. It's all fear because like I'm not in active danger anymore. I still have issues with my trauma. My trauma has nothing to do with my life right now. It's just my fear and my memory of it. I fear that something will happen again.
yeah.
So it's
Like
all
my
about
fear and memory of getting zapped 10 times last year.
yeah.
I
When
live
you
in
were
that
talking
fear.
about that, that was making me down my 200 beats in my heart. You didn't know what 200 beats per minute.
Right, right. Like if I had to like run,
One Red Bull and go to work, I need 6 Red Bulls and
yeah,
still start a pot of coffee or two.
man.
Oh my goodness!
All
I
right,
couldn't imagine.
back to the lesson. But it's really interesting how fear. I don't know. I guess I've never done a lesson on fear like this, and I think we maybe should draw it out to 2 weeks and then see kind of what happens, because like just seeing what we're talking about here, all the different facets of it. And it's interesting that whenever I come across something that I go, wow, we never learned this in church, I kind of go, why don't we? And often I kind of see that I almost think that the enemy has a tactic of not covering topics that people really need, like what real faith is, what is real salvation. And we never talk about those things. We stay in all these other, yeah. And so, like fear, you know, the enemy survives in controlling us by fear. And that's why when he said that you're easy to control while you're in fear, I mean, that is pivotal, you know. That's why you often hear, like, if you ever get into the circles of like demonologists and things like that, and like demonologists, people who study, you know, fallen angels, all right. Um, they'll say that if something happens, you just stand there and act like it didn't happen. And one of the reasons is because of the fact that the fear then shows you can be controlled. And so it in of itself isn't necessarily going to stop whatever's happening, but that is a huge part of it that doesn't allow them to have an extra foothold. Okay.
Dogs can smell fear. What do you think the phone ain't with the girl?
Interesting. Yeah. Dogs can smell fear. That's interesting. All right. So God did not design us to live controlled by fear. All right. He gave us the ability to live in this state of peace and really thrive. If we are trying to be, living in a life that is anything outside of that peace, searching for that peace that God gives, that is not how we were meant to live. So fear is a very common human experience. I mean, that's what I was kind of starting with, was that there is something that we all have that's a fear. Now they might not be really scared. Maybe it's just like a fear of, what's going to happen in the future. What am I going to be when I grow up? Like it doesn't even have to be, something that is, life threatening. It can definitely even be something that, like wow, like when I look at my life, you're like, what a waste. I wasted my life, and then I just, you want to give up and forget about that you still have life to live. Like you can still do something. You're still breathing. But it's interesting how this fear of failing again will sometimes help people to just stay where they are and make excuses for why I can't succeed or why this won't work. So why even try? Because I already know it's not going to work.
Then they end up resonating towards things that help them be okay with stagnation.
Yes, and then you find things that help you to be okay with stagnation. You find crutches to help you to survive. But ultimately, like you really have to get past that. I mean, just for your mental health, like it's interesting how strong the brain is. And like when I was taking martial arts as a young kid, into like probably my high school freshman years, I was learning things that were also outside of just the physical martial arts. I had a couple teachers that were teaching me these mental aspects of the mental power that we have. And it is really weird that like one of the things that I got trained in doing was this focusing of energy. Okay. And like I know this might sound really crazy, and like especially in Christian circles, but our mind is so powerful. Like we really do not understand the complete power that our mind can have. I mean, think about what a thought can do. A thought can lead to the entire destruction of of a country, or it can create something that saves billions of lives. Like one thought that has no weight in my head. It is just a process of a bunch of electrons bouncing between neurons that can come out and catastrophically change the world for good or bad. Okay. So just to think about that our brain has power that we don't really fully understand. Okay. Now with that, there was a focusing technique where you kind of like, I can't exactly say, you just like visualize this ball of energy inside of you. And it was really weird that I could raise my body temperature outside to where snow could fall on me and it would just melt and drip off, and I would not feel cold. Like you could touch me and feel heat radiating away from me. Okay. I got away from that practice, and like now I get cold like everybody else. But there was years where like I never needed a jacket because all I had to do was just take a couple of moments and just like turn on this mental heater inside of my body. All right. So I have seen things like that where the mind is definitely more powerful than what we fully understand. And so if you tell yourself continually, I saw that jump, got scared. He was about to run. Yeah.
I was like,
All right. So
my foot was just
caught it.
trapped.
It's okay. All right. So with this idea of fear, okay, um, if you are telling yourself that you are afraid, guess what your brain's going to do? It's going to echo that back to you. If you tell your brain, I can't, or I have failed and I'm going to fail again, guess what your brain is going to echo back to you? But just saying, I can, helps you to get through whatever it is. Like with Gabriel, when he says something is impossible, man, I swoop in there. I'm like, Nothing is impossible. Just have to try, you know? And he's like, yeah, but what about like if I wanted to fly? I can't fly. And like he'll find something. But I'm trying to program his little mind so that he doesn't see the huge obstacle, but sees ways to get around the obstacle or through the obstacle, whatever it is.
And say you can't fly. People said that 100 years ago. Now look at us.
That's true. People said we couldn't fly, and like, yeah. Well, there are those suits that make you go like a flying squirrel. Like, not for me, but
You're literally speaking to me in college.
oh my gosh,
You can fly. No,
I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
All right. So fear is a common human experience. We all have experienced it. We all will experience it. It's going to be a part of our life until the day we die. You know, but that's another one, fear of death. We are wired for that. And in this biblical story of Job, where the devil wants to tempt him, God says, you can do anything, but you can't threaten his life. And God knows that when he created mankind, that he put an instinct into us to do anything to survive. And so would at the moment of death, he turn and say, you know, I curse God or something along those lines. So the Orthodox Church, the more ancient church, that's how they viewed that, was that God would not allow him to be tempted in a way that we are programmed to fight against. Okay. All right, so fear, other people in the Bible. The Bible never ever pretends like fear is not something that's real. There's many people and there's stories that we find in there. And let's just start with Moses. This is probably one of the most known characters in all of the Bible next to Jesus. And when God called Moses, he didn't say, "Hey, let's go. I have nothing to be afraid of." And in fact, he responds with, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" This comes from Exodus 3. And so Moses himself doubted his abilities and had a fear to go in front of Pharaoh. But yet God still used him. And when God entered into that picture and helped him through this situation, now we have this biblical character that led an entire nation out of Egypt and into the wilderness, and then was their priest and their leader for 40 years. All right, Elijah was another person. Now, his story is kind of interesting. He just beats these 500 prophets of Baal. Okay, this is that whole thing. They were up on Mount, not Sinai, Carmel, Mount Carmel, I think. I think it was Mount Carmel. So they're on top of Mount Carmel, and they say, okay, we're going to have two altars built. You pray to your God. I'm going to pray to the one true God. And whichever sacrifice becomes a burnt offering, that's who God is real. So during this battle, Elijah says, hey, I need you to go find me some buckets of water. Pour buckets of water, just saturate this so that it was all wet. Well, the priests of Baal, they were there doing their thing, cutting themselves, saying their incantations. Nothing was working. Elijah walks up and he's like, Lord, God of the universe. Wham! The thing starts on fire. He then, one man, Elijah, then goes through and starts killing all of these prophets of Baal.
Didn't he like also say, "Where's your God? He must be sleeping."
Yeah, he does. He kind of mocks him a little bit. He kind of mocks.
You gotta add that part. He must be sleeping or something.
Yeah, your God must be sleeping.
Yeah.
So Elijah does that. Now, what happens, and then it's actually kind of crazy because then he's given like superhuman ability to outrun a horse and chariot and makes it back to the city before the horse and chariot does. All right. So now just experience. This is all has been his experience. Now, when he gets back to the city, he has a messenger come to him and says that Jezebel is coming for his life and is going to kill you before the sun sets. And what is this man who just called fire down from heaven, slayed 500 priests of Baal, ran superhuman speeds back to the city? What do you think this guy did? He became a big old coward. He fled to the desert, goes and hides under a tree, and says, God, take my life so that they don't get the opportunity to kill me. Now, his motives kind of sound like they could have been sincere when you read the story, that he didn't want them to now say that, look, your God is not protecting you, or your God must not be real, because how could we kill you like this? Like, he doesn't even give God the chance to protect him. He just immediately becomes fearful that he could actually be killed by Jezebel. And so here's a guy, and it's interesting, that's his tragic mistake. There was one time where I went to a sermon because they talked about the tragic mistake of Elijah, and they actually never got to it. And so I had to go back and I had to look into the story and find out that his tragic mistake was he lost faith. He was faithing and living in God's will. Bless you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So he's living in God's will, and then something comes into his life that he takes his focus off of God and starts to live in fear. All right, I'm going to do one more and then we'll pick up next week. So, one more is the disciples. All right, those guys were something else. Like, I love reading their stories just because, like, they are so human. Like, if you can't put yourself into one of their positions or multiple of their situations, like, I don't know, you've got to be from another planet, because they are just so human. Like, the things that they do, their forgetfulness, their not understanding things, all of it is just our experience in life. But these guys, they're all in a boat. They've seen Jesus do miracles, and suddenly this bad storm comes. Now, in this bad storm, Jesus is sleeping. He's just out sleeping at the front of the ship, and all of these guys are bailing water out from the boat, and finally they go and they wake up Jesus. Gabriel, stop. You're causing confusion and delay. We have to get glue. All right. So they wake up Jesus and they're like, Lord, do you not care if we drowned? So again, they didn't really get that Jesus was who he said he was, because obviously they wouldn't have had that fear, and they were with Jesus. But he wakes up and he rebukes them. He's like, you have such little faith. And he calms the storm. So even people who were walking with Jesus, seeing him do the miracles that he was doing, even they experienced fear. So if you experience fear, you don't have to be so hard on yourself. Just know that even the disciples lived in times of fear because they didn't understand who they were really with. And so for us, do we really understand who God is, who says that I am going to be with you always, so that we don't have to live in a similar fear? Okay? So don't be too hard on yourself. It just means that we're human. Even Jesus's disciples had that problem in life. And as long as you're alive, you're going to have those moments, because this is how we're made. But the best thing to do is to find out, okay, this is how we're made, but what is it that God wants us to do to really live? And 365 times throughout the Bible, apparently, it says, do not fear, do not be afraid. Because now think about this. If the God who spoke and nothing became everything, if the God who measured the sands of the sea out in the palm of his hand, if that is really the God that we worship, that we believe is with us always, then who on the face of the planet should you even be afraid of? Like, ultimately, that's what it comes down to. That if God is really who he said he is, and you believe that he is who he said he is, as others have believed he is what he says he is, that there's nothing else in this world that you can fear, or that you should fear. And that's how I live most of my life, always knowing and understanding that no matter where I go, God is going to be with me. No matter what might transpire, God is going to be there. If I'm driving and I'm far away and I have a flat tire, God knew I was going to have that flat tire. So why be afraid? Don't be afraid of anything but God. Because you know what? I might look at that flat tire as a big problem, but it might just be that I had to stop in this very town because God had a meeting for me. And like, that's something that we don't always think about, but we see it in the scriptures. Like, think about Jonah. He was afraid. He didn't want to go to this place where everybody was just murderous and mean and ornery. So,
Also, like the thing about these people, because I actually taught on Jonah at Urbana, is that these guys were famously known for slaughtering thousands and thousands of Jewish people.
oh
Like,
wow, I
yeah,
didn't know that about them.
yeah,
So
like
the Ninevites killed Jewish people like
so yeah,
as sport.
the, yeah, exactly, and they hated the Jews so much that the king at the time put a bounty of 10,000 talents. Oh, no,
What?
he invested 10,000 talents into killing all the Jews.
Wow,
Wow.
I've never heard that about that.
10,000 talents is over $1 billion.
Wow.
So it's not just Hitler.
Oh,
Oh no, even the Bible shows that there's been multiple people. And like that whole thing with the statue that there's these 8 nations that have come across Israel, but there's still one to come, which is kind of interesting. Um, but yeah, so back to this whole idea of fear, living with God, making sure that you understand He's with you always, understanding how powerful He really is. I mean, think about it, that He can line up these events to happen throughout history. If He wants to get a prophet to a town, He's going to get that prophet through a town, you know? And so if there is a time in history where like you end up like, it was weird for a while, I always carried a lockout kit in my car. I cannot tell you the unbelievable amount of people that I would be parked at Target's parking lot. I would come out from the store and there's a person looking in their car because they locked their keys in the car. And then I'm like, hey, if you want, I can get you in. I got a kit. So I get them in, you know, and then we'd end up talking. And like, for whatever reason, I always felt like God had these meetings set up for me. And it was just weird that that person at that moment needed those keys in that car, and God sent me to the store and parked in that very spot and had that kit to get in and do that. You know, so you just never know how God is going to use something in your life that we might see as mundane or a setback. When actuality, you know, like there was one day I could not, to save my life, get to the expressway. I caught every red light, this, that, and the other thing, people stopping in front of me, and it's just like, what's going on? Finally, I get to the expressway, and if I had been there 5 minutes sooner, there was a huge pileup of cars. And I could not help as I drove past that crash of cars that that was God holding me back from being there because I would have been right in the middle of that mess. You know, just the possibility of that. So we never really know things that might seem like a hindrance to us. That just might be a little heavenly angel standing in your way, blocking your path, and there's no donkey to say, "Hey, don't you see the angel in front of you?" So all right, so Father God, I just thank you so much for the way that you've just masterfully and wonderfully created us. Father God, I just ask you to continue to open our eyes and our ears that we might see and hear these wonders of how you've created us and how we might really live life to the fullest that you want us to live, not living in fear, but living in hope and living in that shalom peace that only you can give. Father God, I just ask that in this next week, you create ways that we are reminded of you, that we see your little God moments in our life, that we start to notice that you are with us always. And in Jesus' name I ask. Amen.
Very good. Very good. Oh my God.
Oh man, because you know what's so